Hey, what's up, kid? Today I'm going to show you how I like to process a galaxy using Photoshop. In the previous video, we went over how to use Deep Sky Stacker, so I'm not going to go over that here, but I am going to show you what I do with the TIFF that comes out. So we've got our TIFF file. I'm going to go ahead and open up Photoshop. Again, I'm a Mac user, but Photoshop's Photoshop, I'm pretty sure. And I use a Windows emulator for those Windows programs. So I still have the ability to do all that stuff and stay true to my Mac roots. I don't know if they're roots, but I definitely jumped over to it because, God, it's just so much better. So we are going to go ahead and, well, first of all, when the TIFF file comes out of Deep Sky Stacker, Photoshop won't recognize it. That may be something that I'm doing wrong, but nevertheless, the workaround I have for it is, and actually this helps me out a lot, is I use Lightroom first. So the first thing I'm going to do is open up Lightroom, and I'm going to bring the TIFF file into Lightroom, and then I'm actually going to do a quick white balance, sort of color correction in here first. Let me get rid of all these. This is from my previous... There we go. Bye-bye. So I'm going to go and import photos and video. And in my case, the filing system on this thing is a little wild. And I'm going to go to my Astro Whirlpool, open it up. I know it's in the light. And we want this autosave right here. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and import the autosave that came out of Deep Sky Stacker, and Lightroom's going to take a second. It's going to take a look at it, try to make heads or tails of it, and then we'll be able to move from there. So when I'm going to go over to the Develop tab here at the top, and I'm going to be able to actually see the image in its super raw form. You can see all the stacking artifacts around the edge. This is because I shot it over the course of several different nights, and I wasn't like, I'd move the scope in the house and bring it back out, and it wasn't in the exact same configuration. And if you look up here in the histogram, you'll notice that there's this crazy separation between your reds and your blue channels, and there's some casting from the light pollution filter that I used, and a number of other issues. Plus you've got all this stuff way down here, and that's the dark edges. So I'm going to take my there's many options in this program, but I'm going to use this little dropper here that's under the color section. I'm going to find a place with no stars, and I'm just going to click once, and just like that, we've solved our color balance problems. This is a lazy approach, okay? I'm not going to get in there and set black points and do all this really confusing stuff. I mean, I could, but I find that I get the same amount of, like, the same results doing it this way, just way faster. So this is how I do it. So once I have it set, and by the way, I don't always do this. If I'm doing some nebulae and I want to assign colors to different channels, I don't take that step. I take what's right out of the camera. But with a galaxy or an image that I intend to be in, like the true color of the thing that it is, this is what I do. So now I'm going to go over here and click on the little thumbnail, and we're going to export this. There's a number of options in here, and I've been doing a lot of star trails, which I convert raw to JPEG, so we're not going to do that here. But first thing we're going to do is choose a folder, one that we're going to know where things are. And in my case, we're going to just use this one we're using for the example today under Astro, and maybe let's go into Whirlpool, and I'll say choose. And then I'm going to pick a name. We'll call it Whirlypool, because whimsy. And then I'm going to come down here and make sure it's set to TIFF. Okay, this TIFF's going to work. So we're going to, and then I just click export, and that's it. We are done in here. It's going to sort of run its process here. But when we go back over to Photoshop, I'm going to go to File and Open. Now I can go to my Whirlpool Galaxy, and there's my Whirlypool TIFF file. Cool. I'm going to open it up, and right away you're going to see the same problem we had before. Okay, we've got, it's sort of funny looking, it's really dark, there's not much there. There's a ton of data in here, but this is what it looks like when it first comes out, right? There's not a lot going on. This galaxy's 31 million light years away. It's really faint, and the rest of it's really dark because there's nothing. So the first thing I'm going to do is deal with the stacking artifacts. And I can see, I hope you can see well here. I'm going to try to bring it in a little, but you can see around the edges there's these funny lines of banding. Those are the different areas where Deep Sky Stacker took and centered what mattered, and sort of it didn't care about what it had to do to line everything up, and that's good. So we're going to go ahead and drag this in and just get rid of all that. Now watch, on the histogram over here, after I click accept, this bar is going to go away because that represents the stuff that's in the extreme of the black point. I don't think I got quite enough on the bottom because there's always a little something around the edge there, and just click it. Look at, gone. Now we have all this real estate in here where we don't need it to be this far along the histogram at this stage in the game. So I'm going to go up here and I'm going to use some keyboard controls so we can move fast. On a Mac, it's Command L and Command M, and I'm going to tell you what they do. But we're going to go to Image, Adjustments. The first thing we're going to do is a levels adjustment. So I'm going to bring in my this black point here all the way over to the edge of my data, and you can actually use your keys too to like nudge it in. And now, look, oh geez, it's gone. Well, now we're going to do a stretch. So we've cleared it up. We've got it all the way up. We've got this pinned over here on the histogram, so it's a little bit darker. Now we're going to go in again, adjustments. This time we're going to take a curves adjustment out. So I'm going to stretch this up a little. And if you watch this galaxy over here on the left, right, you'll see it start to come out of the darkness. All right, and that has done a number on things. Now I'm going to do another levels adjustment. So you can go up to Image, Adjustments, Levels, nudge it over. Cool. Now we're going to do another curves adjustment, and it's just like this, back and forth, slowly, little tweaks, and you'll start to see it come to life. And you're going to see some other things as well in the image. Oops. We're going to do a levels adjustment. Not as much to work with. That's okay. Let's do one more before we take a different step here real quick in the middle. All right, so I'm going to stretch this a little more. Now you really start to see it coming out. All right, cool. I want to just take a look at that real quick. So things I'm looking for. I don't want to blow out the core. That would be unfortunate. Though I think to a certain extent you're bound to with certain images. If you want to get the real detail out of the edges, but I also have other methods for bringing out the outsides. So let's do a levels adjustment just to see where we're at. It's probably not much there, a little bit. All right, I'm going to see about stretching it once more real quick just to see what happens without blowing the core out. So like if I do this, see how it blows it right out. It just washes out that center entirely. But I do think there's a little room here for just a nudge more. Okay, cool. Now, I'm not going to do a levels adjustment yet. I'm going to point out a few things. One, what is all this around the edges? Well, I'm using a very full frame camera on what is ultimately a tight circle inside the Edge HD. So you can see the edges of where the optical tube is sort of creeping in. The other thing is there's a big spot over here, and that is from my off-axis guider nudging its little mirror down into the field of view. It can't be helped, but I can get rid of it, and I'll show you how over the course of a couple steps. But the other thing is there's a gradient. Light pollution filter, all that stuff, it just adds this washed out view across everything. So we can balance that out, and I will add a link in the description to get to RC Astro Gradient Exterminator. You download this, it's killer. I'm just going to run it. So we're going to do Gradient Exterminator. And when you, by the way, when you set it up right, it's going to be under your filters. Down at the bottom, underneath the standard filters, you're going to have the things that you've loaded in as, extra tools. So I'm going to do medium. And you make sure your balance background color is checked. And then just hit OK and wait a minute. We're waiting. It's not the most complicated thing in the world. Just let it do its thing, and as we watch, as soon as it's done, there'll be a noticeable difference in the image. So it's taking care of a lot of that gradient Now the one thing that is definitely left is up here, and that's my the off-axis guider sticking in. But watch this. We're going to do a levels adjustment. And we're going to bring, again, just because sorry, I'm using the keyboard shortcuts. Image, adjustments, levels, until you learn your shortcuts. Let's bring it in now. Look at all the extra room it purchased us on this histogram. That's a much better situation. Now it's a little noisy. By the way, check it out. There's a little galaxy over here on the bottom left. And there's another one up here. It looks like there's another one back there. I love this stuff. Cool. So what we're going to do now is deal with some of the noise before we do anything else to it. And I like to deal with the noise using a little AI. Some people call it cheating, and I don't care. I love Topaz Noise, DeNoise AI, and I will use it as long as they keep making upgrades. So I'm going to go ahead and save this image as it is, and then I'm going to open Topaz Noise DeNoise AI right here. You can get, I'll leave a link to this one. This one is about $80, but it's worth every penny. Hey now, eagles fighting. I love it. All right, so we're going to go to the Browse Images button in the middle right here. This program is really easy to use. We just have to know where to go. We do. We're going to grab our whirlpool TIFF. We just saved it as it was. It's going to zoom you way in. And just watch this for a second. It's going to automatically run an AI algorithm based on a severe noise output and do what it thinks needs doing. And now I can take this bar right here and show you what it did. Before, after, before, after, before, after, before, after. And you can see that it really cleaned things up a little bit. And I don't think, so we can actually run this automatically detect settings run and see what it does with this. I think this might do even better. I like that it bumped up the sharpness a nudge, because I actually think the sharpening in this is insane. Oh yeah, look at that. So on this side over here, you can see all the green in the background. On this side, a lot of it is gone, and it's sharpened up the image a little bit. So you can wash it across this little bar and really see the difference. Topaz Noise, DeNoise AI. I'll eventually say it right. Topaz DeNoise AI, worth every penny. They haven't paid me anything to say that. They should. We're gonna save the image. This is something that I messed up a bunch. I just saved like whatever it said, and yeah, good luck, you're not gonna find it. Make sure you click Save Directory, change it to Source. That way it'll put it back in the file you took it out of, with a funny little name. So we're gonna save it. This takes a minute. Java. I'm just gonna finish this up, Pam, and then I'll get ready real quick.
Okay.
All right.
I'm just taking my time if that's okay.
All right. Listen, take all the time you want.
I'm like just, slowly getting ready. Bathroom's not clean. Our bathroom is not clean.
I don't care. You don't even need makeup. You're so beautiful.
That's not true.
It is true. Staring at you, taking off your makeup, wondering why you even put it on. Flats. Huh?
Did Willa get picked up?
Yeah. I let him in the house for about 8 seconds because it started to pour on their heads.
We're gonna have a lot of Willa time.
Yeah. Okay, so we're done. So the file's done. You can just close this. There's nothing else to it. But we are going to get rid of the file we were using in here in Photoshop. Now we're back in Photoshop. File. Open. Pretty standard. Now look at Whirlpool 1-DeNoise AI severe noise.tiff. It just tells you kind of what it did. And I'm going to open it. Now we have a much better version. Here's what's cool too, though. I'm going to run another image, adjustments, levels adjustment. That noise represents a lot of junk. So we bought ourselves another little bit here in the black point. So we're gonna bring that over. Now, okay, we've got this junk around the edges, right? What are we gonna do with this? What are we gonna do with that? There's a few things we could do. One, I could just crop it out. In this particular case, that would be the easiest thing to do, I think. But what if I don't want to do that? What if I really need this stuff around the edges here? Well, the tool we're going to use pretty much exclusively for the rest of this video is what I think I consider to be my like secret weapon. It's not a secret by any means, but I don't know how many astrophotographers are using it for this purpose. I think a lot of people are using PixInsight these days, and don't get me wrong, I've got PixInsight. I just don't have a freaking clue how to use it. I have the book over there that'll tell me how to use it, but I don't read that. So for now, I'm going to just do the thing I've always been doing, and I'm going to come in here to filter and open up Camera Raw Filter, which is, I mean, it's been updated recently, and it's insane. Like, even if you just want to use this for your like pictures that you take of your family, it's incredible. There's a ton to it. You got a histogram up at the top, of course. You can see here, the very first thing you're going to see is there's a whole bunch of tabs over here on the right. Basic, curve, detail, color mixer, color grading, optics, geometry, effects, and calibration. And some of them you're going to use, some of them you're not. And some of it is going to sound scary, and none of it actually is once you get into it. Basic is just your basic stuff. You can mess with the temperature, the white balance a little bit more. We already made some time doing cool things with that, unless we want to have like the rave version of this. Now, anytime you make a change in here you don't like, just go to the middle of the little slider and double click it, and it erases it. And so that's cool. And then you could turn up your exposure, but that would be insane. Look at the weird patterns from my camera. Don't like it. You can crank your contrast, lower your contrast, depending on what it is you're trying to do. You can jack up the highlights, which is the bright parts, and we can really just blow the image out. You can turn down your shadows, and that changes like the darkness of the background, and you know, all of these things have a place. But for now, you're gonna see like there's a lot you can do with like these elements here in the whites and in the black areas. And so what all of this is doing right here. So what is contrast? Contrast is basically altering the ratio of these highlights to shadows, whites to blacks, the light to dark, and you're sort of changing the ratio of it to be less or more. And I actually like a little bit of contrast. I think it looks really cool, but it really depends on what you're doing, what you're trying to do in a given moment. So for now, I'm going to leave it as is, and we're going to kind of take a step forward. One of the things I do like to do here a little bit is just add a little saturation. So if you add a lot, look at that. It takes all of the colors that are in there and just, well, it saturates the hell out of them and makes them more abundant. If you shut it all the way off, you essentially end up with a black and white image. There are varying degrees of saturation. Sometimes it's really cool to just have a little bit. You get sort of a black and white, but not a lot. So you crank it up, and then your vibrance is kind of like the extremes of that. I don't even know how to describe it other than just do it, and you'll see what I mean. So those things are all great. I am going to turn up the saturation just a little bit so that I can see what I'm doing and what I'm working with when it comes to color. But I promised you we'd be dealing with this stuff around the edges. So the first thing I'm going to do is over here, there's a little circly dot thing, and this is the masking tool. With the most recent update to this, and this is April of 2022, it is ridiculous. This select sky feature is sick if you're doing like landscape photography and you want to replace the sky. It's incredible. Or just like change the different blends. Select sky is awesome. But we're going to use a brush today. And you can see that's way too big. So I'm going to take my brush size down a little bit. That's a little more palatable. And you'll notice that there's like a dark circle. I'm going to move it over the galaxy. You can see I'm not clicking, but there's a dark circle in the middle. That's like going to get hit the hardest. And then there's the dots around the edges, and that sort of represents the feathering. I like to put a lot of feathering on this so that there aren't these really stark differences between my mask and what's not under my mask, because that's going to look super weird. So the first thing I'm going to do is just start to paint it in the areas that I think are going to need love, around the edges particularly, and even sort of just creeping in towards the galaxy a little bit, but you can see that the blue represents where this mask is going to be. Now, as soon as I make a change to anything down here, it's going to impact the area that I've masked. So if I turn up the contrast, you're going to see a darkening effect all around the galaxy, but not in it, because I'm impacting what I've masked. And then the other thing I'll probably do here is sort of take my shadows down a little bit, take the black point down a little bit, and you'll start to see some of these things go away. And you can really, you can click on these areas a little bit more and just ease it back a little bit more. And I'll probably end up cropping some of this out, but then you can sort of paint in a little more what you've done as you try to work your way through and around it. So cool. That's neat. So now I've dealt with some of that. I'm gonna crop it in a little, like I said. But the other thing I like to do out here is take the noise reduction up a notch, because I really want it to be smooth out there. There's nothing. This is a galaxy. I don't. If it's a nebula, I'm doing a whole different process. But because it's this galaxy, this tiny little thing at the middle, I want it to be the thing that sings. People will go, oh, you're killing your black, you're burning out your black point here. Yeah, that's true. Sometimes you shouldn't do that because it looks weird. I think in this case it looks kind of fine. Maybe I went a little too heavy with it, but that's all right. So besides, I was really just trying to get rid of some of the edges there. So that just gives you an idea of how you can kind of adjust the background a bit, and get rid of some of the funny things that are happening in the dark areas right there, which are really susceptible to problems because there's no signal at all except just coming from the stars and whatever light pollution you're dealing with. So I'm going to leave that as it is for the moment, and I'm going to take my crop in just a tad, see if I can't say bye-bye to some of those extraneous deals. I like to keep it in sort of a rectangle because I do a lot of stuff on Instagram, so flip this the other way and you've got a 16:9 ratio. All right, cool. That's looking cool. Now I'm gonna, how do I get it to look all kind of pretty and colorful? Well, the colors are all in there. You just have to kind of help them come out. And again, I'm going to go to camera raw filter, open this back up, and now we're going to take a look at some of the other tabs. So basics, that's good for the moment. I'm going to skip over curve, though you can do curve stuff in here. I don't do it. I don't use it that much. Once in a while. My detail. So I would like to sharpen this up. One thing I want to do. Actually, I take that back. Let us do one more mask real quick. I'm going to take my brush. This time I'm just going to hit the galaxy itself. All right. What are we doing? I'm going to come down here and I'm going to nudge up my clarity just a little bit, because if you go too far, it starts to like really blow out the core. But if you give it just a little bit, well, let me start over so I can see what I'm doing. It starts to crisp those things up, and then I'm going to take up my sharpness a little bit in here too. Whoa, look at that. I don't know if you can see it from your end, but from mine, it's making a pretty significant difference in the literal sharpness of what we're looking at on the inside of this thing. Okay, cool. Let's get out of there before we go nuts. All right, now we're going to go back, open another camera raw filter. Don't click the top one. That's just the last thing you did. It'll take all the settings you just made and reapply them even harder. So I did that once and it was like the best picture I ever had. All right, so we're going to go down here now in the tabs to the color mixer. This is where we're going to start to kind of manipulate some of what's here. Manipulate's the wrong word. We're manipulating it. So there are settings across the top. There's the hue, the saturation, and the luminance. Luminance is how bright a certain color is. I'm going to describe this in the way that I understand it. This is probably not like technically right, but it's right enough. So luminance is like how bright is the thing that you're adjusting. So if I crank the red's brightness, you'll see like it literally just gets more highlighted. Sometimes it doesn't necessarily make it more red. If anything, it makes it less red but more bright. So the other thing is saturation. Again, this is like your overall saturation mixer. How much of the color is there? Like how prominent is it? Whereas hue is like, well, what does red mean? Does red mean pink? Does red mean orange? Or does it mean dead center red? I don't know yet. We're going to have to play around with it. Does orange mean really yellowy green? No. Does it mean crazy pinkish craziness? Probably not. I'm going to leave it in the middle for the moment. And the first thing I'm going to do is saturation in this case. Now, I'm looking at this object, and there's a little galaxy that's passing behind this. We actually used to think that it was being like sucked into it. It's not. It's passing behind it, but it is. They are interacting gravitationally. There's a huge black hole in this one over here. Lots of star formation kicking off, but it's as it passed behind this over billions and billions of years, it helped to consolidate the spiral arms, which when you're looking at it top down, kind of the way we are, or like from the top, if you will, it really looks awesome from our point of view. I actually think the Milky Way probably looks something like this without this weird galaxy passing behind it. But okay, so let's take our reds and turn them up a little bit, because there is a lot of wonderful nebulosity in the spiral arms here, and I just want to see more of it. So then we can turn up our oranges a little bit. Then you can start to see a lot of the dust lanes that are in here are living in that kind of orange to red brown area, and that's where you're going to be able to extract that. Let's see, the yellow's probably going to be okay. Sometimes you want to take the green out a little depending on what's happening. That's cool. Let's see, blue maybe a little bit. There tends to be some in there. And the other thing we'll do later is we may say, you know, I want to see a little more of that blue. So I might nudge it over, but I don't want it to happen to everything. So I'm going to show you when I'm going to do that later. So back to the color mixer. Now let me come over to the hue and just make sure I'm not interested in seeing it wildly pink in the reds. See, if I do that, they really stand out, but it looks a little unnatural to me. So I'm gonna just ease it in that direction. Sometimes if I like something, I don't like the extreme of it. I just like a hint of it. So that's what I'll do. I'll kind of nudge it that way. And let's see what the orange is. Not that way. That way a little bit. I think looks a lot cooler. Okay, cool. So the other thing we're going to do here in this, while we're doing this, is I'm going to head to my color grading. Color grading is crazy powerful stuff. So what do all these things do? This is the shadows section, where you can raise the shadows kind of in general. And you can also, add like more shadows or take the shadow areas out entirely. It really depends on what you're trying to do. I think if you do it too much, in a case like this, you lose the cool, like look right in here, there's some extra stars. Like these are just clouds of stars and dust that are kind of in a halo around all of that. And you lose it if you take it away. If you add it too much, then it just looks like garbage and that weird effect is happening in the back. That actually might be from the drizzling. I'll have to look into that. Anyways, so if I kind of dial it off just a little, I think that cleans things up a bit without me losing control. Now the midtones, that's the stuff that's in the middle brightness level, and the highlights is the top. So as I crank, if I turn up the midtones, you can see that has a profound effect on this thing. But maybe I don't want to do it all around. Maybe I just want a little bit of that. And the other thing you can do is you can choose a certain type of color that you want to increase the midtones on. And you can get really wild. I'm not going to do any of that. We're going to leave it dead center. And then I'm going to just see where I like it. Hold on, that might be a little too much. Let me just start over. So once again, double click on it. Start it over. Nudge it. Some of this stuff is in the finesse. Now here's your highlights. If I crank that, blows the core right out. If I shut it all the way out, it creates this strange effect too. I think that I'm just going to probably leave it where it was. Yep. And then there's like a blending of those effects that can be really nice if you, in certain situations, you just kind of play with it and see what it looks like to your eyes. And what'll happen is you'll be moving a slider and you'll be watching the image, and then it'll go like, oh dude, that's it. And that's when your style is going to start to emerge from this process, because nobody else is going to see it quite like you do. And so as you are sliding that slider and staring at that image, when it hits that sweet spot for you, that's you coming through. Do it up. All right, so we're going to hit OK. And it's going to take all of this back over here, and then bam, it's going to kind of pop through. I think that's looking pretty good. But there's one more thing I'd like to do before we, and you can go crazy with this stuff and get into the little nitty gritty details. I'll leave you to that psychosis. Trust me, I go down millions of avenues like that, spending way too much time doing this sometimes. But I want to mask some things, because one of the things I want to do is take this over here, this other galaxy, and treat it slightly differently than this over here. So I'm going to take my brush, that's too big, I'm going to get a small one, and just try to get that. And I want to see what happens when I turn up the saturation on it a little, bring out some of that orangeness. That's probably good. And then I may consider just seeing what happens with some of the no, I'm going to leave that. I think that looks pretty cool. That looks good to me. All right, so I'm going to say okay. Now I'm going to I've adjusted that, but now I'm going to do the rest of the galaxy, because I'll show you why, because I'd like to see it shift into a tad into the blue in some of the areas, because I think it makes it look a little more, well, cooler. All right, so I'm going to take this down a little bit here and just ever so slightly get into those areas. All right, and then we're going to go down here and take the temperature of it and just ease it slightly. If I go too far, it's going to look kind of wacky. Actually looks pretty rad, but just a little bit into the blue, a little, and then I'm going to turn up the saturation just a tad on this part. Now there's like some real differentiation between these two areas right here. And I might even say, give me a little bit of a smaller brush and like complete the story down into here a little bit, just so that it sort of blends them together. That might have been too wild in there. Let's see, I can paint over these parts. Whoa, that's screaming now. And in that case, what I'll do is probably just ease it back a little bit. You're getting to see behind the curtains here into the, like, I'll go into something like that and go, wait, like, how much of that, how much of that, how much of that, for hours. But for the purposes of this video, I'm thrilled with this. I think if there's some things you could do, you could try to add a little more sharpness to it. Nothing wrong with that whatsoever. I recommend doing it with a mask in here, because that way you're not affecting the entire image, which can be, you don't really want to sharpen some of the stuff that's not as great about the image, but you can come down here, certainly see if a little more clarity helps. It looks like it did. Add a little more sharpness. And by the way, you might get to a point where you're like, oh, the sharpness is great. I wish I could add a little more noise reduction though, because it's brought out something. Well, you can balance those things in here too. In this case, I think that's looking pretty hot. So this is my approach. This is what I do. I do things a little bit differently when I'm working with a nebulae or the moon or something. But camera raw filter all day long inside of Photoshop. It can do a ton for you. I'll add those links I mentioned earlier. And if you have any questions, write them below or hit me up on Instagram, shoot me a DM, and I'll do my best to help you. Otherwise, I hope you have a great rest of your day, and take it easy, buddy.